Hey, I'm Chris Palmore, and this is Gratitude-Based Radio. This is a Gratitude and Sobriety episode, and I've got my friend Curtis here. I'm going to add him in right now. How you doing there, Curtis?
Good. You?
Good to see you, man. Where in the world are you? I can't. Where are you? Up north? Where are you at now?
Yeah, I'm in Philly currently.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, would you like to introduce our special guest? You can bring him in.
Yeah, I would. Are you going to bring him in on the camera or?
Yeah, say his name and I'll bring him in.
Oh, Kelly Seidlitz is his name.
All right, bam.
Oh, cool. Nice. So yeah, Kelly is the owner of Gratitude Recovery in Malibu. And are you guys currently in Brentwood still or just Malibu?
Both.
In Malibu and Brentwood, California. And when I was 4 months sober, I moved there from after residential treatment in Oxford, Mississippi, and then sober living in Oxford, Mississippi. And then I lived with Kelly not with Kelly literally, but I lived in one of Kelly's homes for another 8 months. So Kelly was instrumental in my early recovery and just in my gratitude practice as a whole, as you know, as it's indicated by the name of his company, Gratitude Recovery. He too, like us, believes in the power of the concept. And he's just really fucking awesome. And I'm glad to have him here. And I love you, Kelly, so much.
Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate being here. And that was very kind. Thank you, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome.
Curtis.
Well,
Yeah.
It's great. Last week we were having our last podcast. He brought you up, Kelly. Your name came up because we were talking. He's like Gratitude Recovery, and I was like, I want to meet that guy. And then, because of the conversation, that's how conversations go, right? They bring up new ideas and new people, and then here we are. So, can you share some? I mean, obviously, Curtis has said some things about you, but would you mind telling us, in your own words, some things about you and your journey to where you are today?
Sure. I'm just a small town Montana farm boy who found life to be ridiculous. I grew up in a small town, maybe 800 people on a good day, went away, got attracted to attention and drugs fairly early in my life. And that took me down a whole nother pathway. Lots of I'm not good enough, lots of beliefs in what am I going to do to get love? What am I going to do to get acceptance? And that went on for a good number of years. And people would look at me because I can be outwardly gregarious and fun, but inside I was just empty. And so when I would tell people that's where I was at, they didn't believe me. And so that made it even worse, because if you're not authentic, when I'm not authentic, I don't have good relationships, period. Because I'm always thinking, well, they don't really know me, so they can't really like me. And, that went along. I was able to bounce, played football in college, got a degree, left, went to law school at Gonzaga University. Oh, this side. By the way, they're playing tonight in the WCC championship. So go Zags. And at law school, met a lot of very intense, driven people. And I have a tendency to attract the same kind of people. I think we all do. And that was lost, willing to take risks, to use substances to feel better about myself, and drive and get through something so people can look at you and go, wow, look, he's a lawyer. Wow, look, he's this. And all those things never helped me feel better. And so I finally broke. I went to treatment once in '89, and this is my theory of treatment. Walked into the first group and they said, 12 steps on the wall. You need to know them. That's what's going to save your life. So at the end of group, I'm like, I know them. I'm ready to go. And then I held on for 3 more days, thinking that's a long time, and then left. Just white knuckled it for about 18 months, And then just a little trigger. Somebody used a word that I took offense to. It rhymes with wussy. And it was like that attack that hit at my core where I still did not feel good about myself. It's like, well, I'm not that. So then immediately took a shot at a bachelor party. And then I was on a roll for about 22 months, desperate, into hell. Was fortunate enough to then go to treatment. My family, I was living in Seattle at the time. My family from Montana flew out, did an intervention. I went to treatment, and I just started resting that first week. And I'm like, okay, I'll just go back and just use on Friday and Saturday nights. Because I'd use cocaine and I'd go for 7-8 days and run, and then it was ugly. And I thought, well, if I could just limit it to 2 days. And then I still had all that emptiness in me of, again, looking external, outward. Had a pretty profound spiritual experience while I was in treatment that sort of shifted me. My youngest brother, when he was 22 months old, died. I was 7, didn't really understand life, death, and the permanency of all that. But one of my other brothers and I were outside playing with him in a water puddle because it had rained. My mom came home and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to kill this kid?" Because I guess he was sick. We'd had no idea. Well, he went to the hospital and died that night. And I have that memory inside from that point on that I killed my brother and it's my fault. And my mom is she's a wonderful human being, and she has a faith. She's a very, very healthy, practicing Catholic, and she found solace in God when her son died. Well, I'm 7, and she says God took him to be an angel. So I'm like, I would use the F word, but I don't know what we do on this. So I'll just say that for a long time with God. And so then there was just sort of created another chasm that drove me into that space for a long time. It's like, there's nothing, it's not real. It's, God's a punishing God. It's horrible. And then in treatment, my little brother came to me after about 10 days and just said, "Hey, it wasn't your fault. You're okay." And it shifted. I don't know what it was, spiritual enlightenment, awakened connection, something that just said, I'm not just a useless human being. And then started to listen, be open, follow some direction of, what can you do that's sort of just not attaining something, not a law degree, not a car, not a house, something that's going to be of value. And so my whole philosophy there sort of shifted. At that point, I said, I'm going to become a drug and alcohol counselor. So I went to treatment in October of 92, and they said, "Oh, you need to stay longer." I'm like, "Nope." "You need to take meds." I'm like, "Nope." "You need to do IOP." "Nope." "You need to live in a halfway house," which now would be called sober living. I'm like, "Nope." "You need to keep doing therapy and do the work." And I'm like, "No, no, no." And then that experience with my brother and the shift, and I'm like, "Yep, I'll do it all." So I stayed longer. I moved into a sober living. I stayed there for a year. I went to 3 meetings a day for 18 months, got a sponsor, worked the steps, did therapy, did IOP, all trying to find a space where I am sort of today, which is connected again to what I thought I was disconnected from, wasn't ever really. But what I did, I put the blocks in place so I couldn't feel or experience it. And a huge part of that's gratitude, of just being able to be okay with what is, And so I got into treatment, said I'm going to go back to school, but didn't for a minute because somebody said, "Oh, you got to go get a 4-year degree." And I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's too much time. And then after about 6 years, I'm out. I'm still practicing law, not that happy with it. It's not spiritually connecting for me. Lots of people can do it and it's good. I didn't go back to drink. I did have some depression. And then someone said, "Oh, you just need a 2-year degree to do a drug and alcohol counseling." So I said, "Bam, I'll do it." So I closed my law office. I went back to school, did a 2-year degree, became a drug and alcohol counselor. Because I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack, let's say. So I did that. And then I started doing it. I'm like, this isn't enough. So then I went and got a 2-year master's degree in psychology with a specialization in addictions, because that helped me. And some of it's probably my own stuff. The better I understand me, the better I'm able to understand and connect with others too. And so I think some of the schooling was for that. Then got trained formally by Marcia Linehan and her team in DBT. And then Alan Marlatt in Mindfulness-Based relapse prevention. And all of that, the meetings, the recovery, the education, put me into a place where I moved into the treatment world. And so then I became a drug and alcohol counselor at a intensive outpatient. And then I moved into a locked psych unit for children and adolescents. And at that same time, do you guys hear those dings?
No.
Oh, good. Because I was going to try to turn my notes off. Oh, great. Okay. My wife and I were doing therapeutic foster care at that time. So we had 6 complicated, challenging kids that lived with us at a time. And then I worked at a psych hospital where some of them came from. Putting in a drug and alcohol treatment program and then some education for parents, and then moved to an adolescent prison to implement DBT in a drug and alcohol treatment unit on that. And then one day my wife says, it's too cold. We were living in South Tacoma doing foster care. I'm driving up to Snoqualmie. If anybody's familiar with it, beautiful area. I mean, ridiculous. West of Seattle, up in the mountains, and just glorious. And she said, it's too cold. I need to move. So that's what got us to Southern California. As I looked for a place, and there was a program called the Canyon that was just opening. And I flew down on March 17th, interviewed, got offered the job on April 1st. I'm back at Echo Glen Children's Center is the name of the facility. And I was doing a training for Train the Trainers in suicide prevention. So I learned it to then teach all my staff. And I'm telling people I just got offered a job and I'm leaving. They're like, oh, it's April Fool's. And I'm like, no, I'm really going. And then came down here and worked in the treatment industry as a program director, individual primary therapist, ropes facilitator, etc. Stayed at the Canyon 8 years, then moved to Promises for about 18 months. And then we had a parting of the ways, which was a God shot, because that said, Annette and I are like, okay, what are we going to do? And we had talked about doing sober living for a couple of reasons. One, it saved my life. I met some great people, and it really built a foundation to shift my perspective. And I'd seen through that years of treatment, particularly in Southern California, people who left residential treatment and went to a good sober living did better. Just their outcomes were, they had longer term recovery, a better foundation, et cetera. And so we talked about setting it up, and she's like, let's do it. I'm like, oh, that's great. And the term gratitude she came up with, which is great. I mean, Annette's fabulous in many ways and lots of things she does. She is an Al-Anon because she doesn't have a substance use problem. But she said, this is all about gratitude. And it was like, yes, it is. And that's sort of our flavor. While we bring in DBT, we bring in mindfulness, we use smart recovery, refuge recovery, AA, because we want people to find what's going to help them become grateful. And then we just try to practice showing up. There's so many strategies like radical acceptance. That's just accepting and being okay with what is. And to me, that's grateful. I read somewhere in this journey, and if I'm rambling too long, just tell me to stop and I'll
continue.
I don't remember who the author was. I would give them credit. But he said, sometimes the best prayer is thank you. And, to me, that's gratitude. It's like I'm embracing this. I'm happy for this. I'm grateful for this. And I know we were touching on it a little bit, Chris, before of, I get to choose today, and I think that's the greatest gift of being in recovery for me, and all that, whether it's the master's degree or the DBT or the AA or the law degree or my child died, whatever. But now there's something that allows me to take some space between that first initial whatever space process, and then I can respond rather than react. And my responses when I do that are much more from a place of that's going to lead me I'm either coming from gratitude or it's going to lead me to gratitude. And that's a gift. And even like through this pandemic, as Curtis was sort of asked, I don't remember if it was in the beginning or whenever, we had 3 houses at one time, and COVID hit hard, and we had to close one of our houses, and that was painful, and that yet at the same time in that pain, the other side was, if we don't do this, we're going to lose the whole company. And being able to do that, and again, not to say, oh yeah, this is great, yet I am grateful, because that would have created we would have struggled and would have been very miserable and very stressed out. And it allowed us to be certainly more at peace and more grateful, even in a really difficult circumstance. One last thing I'll say before I finish this first ramble is, when I was reading your, I don't even know what to call it, but what you sort of write on that, I clicked on the website that Curtis was in the email, and it was sort of talking about your story and the letter you wrote to your mom. And, it was power. It was so moving to me. It's like my dad and I had a complicated relationship, to say the least. I thought he hated me. I was pretty sure I hated him. But there was love, but there was just so much clash. And when I went to treatment, he may have said it before, but I don't ever remember him telling me he loved me before I went to treatment. And he got connected to Al-Anon. And that was a gift that we hadn't had for 30. I was 32 at the time, 31, almost 32. And then we were able to stay in that place. And I was able to go home and see him a number of times. He got sick, unfortunately, and passed away, but we were good, and I am so grateful that I was able to make that repair, that reconnection, whatever you want to call it, long before that happened, and that's a gift. That's sort of, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I love that because, Ethan, and I appreciate you reading the website about my mom, and I love, it's, as long as someone's alive, like it's never too late to connect, like we have, that's the whole thing about like, now is the time, right? Like this is the moment, because we're not promised any more moments. And that's, a huge part of gratitude is being present. If you're not present, you can't appreciate what's in front of you. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
It's so massive. And you sharing that story about, you and your father coming together after you went through becoming clean and becoming this who you are now, and that even though you didn't connect up to that moment, how grateful you are that you did connect, right? It's not like you're sitting here going, you didn't share, because somebody could share a story and go, well, 30 years we didn't love each other, right? And that's not what I heard at all. I heard a man that appreciated that he had the opportunity and that it happened. And that's because you can sit on the swing and go up or down. It's like, what are you going to choose there? Like it's and what you shared is beautiful. It really is. So thank you for sharing that. Curtis, do you have any
thank you.
thoughts?
I was just thinking, not only did this is kind of like off topic, but not really.
All right.
Kelly and Annette, or Nettie as I know her, or either. I also worked for them for probably close to a year or something, Kelly?
Yeah.
I was like, I knew that I wanted to go into the field, as I've talked about before in these things. And it's kind of like the way you start is just by either working in a treatment center or working in a sober living or whatever. So I told them as I was, going to move out of the house, because it was like part of the deal with my parents as I was moving out of sober living, and they were being super supportive financially and emotionally and all the things. But this is speaking to the financial piece of it. They were like, well, you got to start working. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to work in treatment. And I knew I wanted to do it because I was just feeling called to do so. So I told them I wanted to work for them, and they were like, well, we've got to you can't come in as a conflict of interest working when there are people that you can't work with people that lived in the home with you. It's not ethical. So I went and worked at another place, and then ended up, as soon as the last kid that was living there cycled out, I started working with them, and that was cool. So that was, they've been a huge part of my whole evolution and my recovery. And I'm always very intentional about shooting them a text every once in a while when I'm feeling moved about just how grateful I am for them, the two of them. And they were super, super rad as far as giving me time off to go to Florida to see my kids. And it was never it was always really understanding. And it was the coolest thing, because that was the beginning of my ability to be. I wasn't completely self-sustainable at that point, but I was getting there, and I was also getting to see the kids a lot more. And Kristen, my ex, had lifted the unofficial stipulation that you can see the kids without your parents there, because early on I was just meeting my parents in Orlando, and then I remember how how stoked I was when she sent me the text that day. She's like, "Hey, I hope you know that like your parents don't need to be here to see the kids. Like you've been sober long enough. I'd made amends to her at that point, and it was just really cool and it was a huge milestone in my recovery to have that freedom to go spend time with the kids essentially without supervised visitation. It wasn't an unofficial supervised visitation. And rightfully so, because I had no business being around the kids without somebody there for a while anyway. But Kelly and Annette were really understanding about that. And it was just a matter of like, hey, I'm going to go to Florida if that's cool with you guys. And it was always met with like, hell yeah. Like we support that. And that's kind of the environment they created. And that's the environment that my now boss and the approach I take to the whole thing. It's like meeting people where they're at and like walking alongside of them in their recovery rather than like trying to jam it down their fucking throat or, not like completely stepping back. It's a matter of like a partnership and working with them. And again, like I said, walking alongside of them, because I think that approach of meeting someone where they're at for me was much more effective than like having a militant approach taken, which some people need. Some people really need that. They need, and it probably would have worked for me, but I know that I would have pushed back against it. But it's, all these things really fall into line if I practice a few things daily, and one of which is definitely gratitude. And it's the basis for this entire podcast, which we continue to have a lot of fun with, and we continue to have like really interesting guests and really awesome conversations. And Chris, your dedication and diligence to making sure I stay on task as far as like, all right, let's do another one this week, or what's the deal? It's just like, I'm always, and I like I said in that voice note I sent you yesterday, it's really, it's something I'm super grateful for. And it's, I don't know where I was going with any of this.
Thanks, man. No, I just, I appreciate that. I don't know if you told Kelly how we met, but Curtis is obviously very vocal on social media, and we are both very grateful to Instagram because I just follow the hashtag gratitude, and I happen to be passing through on the app just to see random Curtis pop up there, saying he was grateful he was 5.5 years sober, and that's his saying with his sobriety and his gratitude. And I saw that and I looked at it and I was like, this is a guy I want to talk to, and he wasn't the first, he wasn't the first person I'd reached out to wanting to have a conversation about gratitude and sobriety. And like, and this, but I got on the phone. Well, you were the best. Okay. That's all that matters. So, no, I'm just saying I remember seeing some messages from different people and like just seeing I could get it, have a conversation, and it never happened, which is fine. And I'm glad it didn't happen, because if it would have happened, maybe I would have never been there to show up for here we are now. Right. I'm very, again, grateful for that moment that I happened to have Curtis's image come across me with his message. And, we got on the phone and we automatically clicked, and I was like, well, I would love to have you share your story and gratitude on the podcast. And, and I remember in our first conversation, I said to him, if this goes well and you like it, man, we could do this. We could get people on, we can open up more spaces. And I want to share some serious gratitude to you, man. I know you appreciate me, but I appreciate you so much because, all I want to do is have these conversations, right? And all I want to do is create more places for the conversations. And you make that happen. I'm meeting your friend Kelly right now. Yeah. I would never have met him in my entire life. We would never be having this. So it's like, I've told us before, it's like I landed on Planet Curtis and I'm excited, and you're awesome and your friends are awesome. And I want to talk to all of them. And I know there's like, we get it that like, there's so many people that have great stories, and there's so much gratitude in those stories. And all we have to do is ask people if they want to share it, and that's it, and this could go on forever. There's that much, right? There's so much more.
Yeah.
So anyways, I just want to say, so pivoting back to Kelly here, though, I'm going to stop talking, Kelly. You go ahead, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then also, I definitely want to get into your first impressions of Curtis too.
Sure. I'll start with at the end of where you were, sort of, this can go on forever. And I hope it does. Right. We were talking a little before the show, there's so much, whatever. And I get caught up in some of the political, but what I've chosen not to do is not be ungrateful. I mean, I can post and go on. I don't hold it, because that will take me out of gratitude, and I think being able to find all of those things, and commenting. And so, yes, I hope you guys do it. I hope you keep it. While I do appreciate there are a lot of people who have gratitude and can connect and have great stories, that's great. Chris, I'm just getting to know you, and you seem perfect for this. And Curtis is. I just, and commenting on some of the things that he had said is like, he will. I don't know if it's random. I don't know if it's God. I don't know if it's whatever, but he will just text us some stuff, or I'll see it on Facebook. I mean, I just almost started crying because I remember when he texted that he got to see his kids unsupervised. And that was just like that. I mean, it can't be as good as Curtis's gratitude. Hear me. I mean, I'm not trying to, but that's moving. I mean, and I talk about it, and we get tearful of so much joy and gratitude that says, yes, this is why we'll show up another day. That story, hearing Curtis say this, will carry me through a lot of really complicated, difficult circumstances, and I think from the gratitude perspective, in the moment, gratitude is great, but it's also such a great resource. When shit hits the fan, and it's gonna, I have those
guaranteed it's going to.
Yeah, for sure. I have moments of this conversation that I can go to, things like what Curtis said, thinking about my dad. Part of why I went to law school is because I wanted my dad to love me and to be proud of me. The last 2 years of his life, he would get on the phone. He was losing his hearing, so he couldn't hear, and he'd get cranky because he couldn't hear, but whatever. And he would just tell me he loved me and how proud he was of what I was doing, and that I make a difference in people's lives. And it's like, man. And again, having those things that build for us, and having this podcast where other people get to hear this and touch a little bit on some of the stories or whatever people share, to say, you know what, if you don't have gratitude right now, take a little piece of this gratitude, hold on to it till you have your own. I look at that sort of like the AA saying, we'll love you till you can love yourself. You can have my gratitude till you can find your own. There's plenty around, when my eyes are open and willing to look at it. So Curtis, when I first met Curtis, he was pretty open, pretty willing. There was a little hesitancy. I met the person he works with now, Tom, at the same time, and Tom Tom would share some stories with me, not nitty gritty stories, but just had said about there had been some times where Curtis was maybe a little less willing, let's say, in the time that they had sort of been working together, but that he'd come a long way and he thought he was going to do really well. And from our perspective, when somebody has a good long period in treatment, it can be a couple of different ways. It can be somebody was really needed so much time because they were so unwilling, or they were really doing some serious work. And it became fairly clear fairly early that that's where Curtis was, is that he wanted something different, that he had sort of gotten sort of a bit of a flavor of it, was really open to feedback and direction. I mean, there's a couple bumps like everything, but nothing that sticks out to me that says, oh my God, Curtis. But what I do know, and I still am, I don't know if amazed is the right word, but certainly impressed by his willingness and commitment to do the things that help him be okay and then live a life. Curtis isn't just like, I'm just sitting in the rooms 24/7, talking AA in a hall, smoking a cigarette, drinking coffee. And I'm not judging that as you drink your coffee, or that anybody does it. Cause I'm like, hey dude, whatever. If you're not drinking, drugging, and not having a miserable, go for it. That's great. But Curtis has really stepped it up. And I'm sure part of that's because of, whatever I think he used the word, his calling was to sort of give back and to be in this place. And I think because lots of Curtis's history before I met him is powerful, and I know it, but I only know it by hearing it. I didn't live it. And I think that puts Curtis in a position to really be of great value for people, of being able to where I can sit in that and say, hey, I had lots and I was here, and I know that I can help you not be there too. And that's a pretty good thing. And I was looking back at, I don't know, something. Was I scrolling pictures or something, or I don't know, it just popped up and it was our business card, Gratitude Recovery, Curtis Cockrell marketing. And I went, oh my God, that's right. I'd forgotten that there was a piece of that. And it was like, and what I was like, is like, I was great. It was like, yes, because part of what we do in what Curtis talked about is like, yeah, we want to make sure there's not the potential conflict with you now are the staff over somebody you were right here with a minute ago. Right. But it's also, we want the right kind of people. And Curtis was definitely that. Curtis knows this, because I don't know if you've ever been around, or if there's just some people who we won't work with, I'll say, right. Because we're going to be pretty straightforward. What you see is what you get, like it or not, transparency, authenticity. And then we end up getting more gratitude out of that, because I don't have to remember what I said to somebody. Did I promise something I couldn't do, or make something that was where I wasn't? It's like, dude, it's simple. Just show up and be. And I saw a lot of that in Curtis, and I still do in what he's doing, and watching him grow in his profession and commitment to it, and is inspiring.
Thanks, Kelly. Speaking to Kelly. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
6 years.
What'd you say?
And
I know, 2.5 months.
Yeah, no, in a couple of 12 days.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't realize that. For some reason in my head, I had May, but March, yes.
That's March 22nd. So
isn't that ridiculous? And just so we're clear, March 26th, I turned 60. Hard to believe that I'm 60 years old. Just want to throw that out there. But 6, way to go. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I want to speak to Curtis. I want to give a little love to Curtis too, Kelly, real quick, and just say, I've been talking a lot of this last year, all I want to do is be a catalyst for gratitude, I want to be a catalyst for gratitude. And, there's so many ways you can do that, but a simple, straightforward way is just to be of service to people, to show up and be with somebody, just to be in Curtis. I know he does that for a lot of people. I know his heart's in that. And that's such a beautiful thing. And that works so well for gratitude, because it allows you to be present. It allows you not to be thinking about yourself, because you're there for somebody else. And it's service is such a powerful thing to bring you presence. And it's a massively gratifying thing. So just give you a little more love there. And I know that he obviously you showed him that kind of love when he was with you. And that's something that he's grown out of too. So there we go. There's another blanket on you there, Curtis.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's all about service. It's all about always being of service. And it's also, for me, it's about finding balance in that too, because the deal with you asking me to do this, and I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. I was taught to say yes to requests and commitments like that. And that's where spiritual growth comes, and that's where doors open that you didn't think were going to open. And that's just where the real spiritual rewards come from, as far as acts of service and being of service to other alcoholics and drug addicts. And it's very clear that I'm, that I'm open to that via just by looking at my social media daily. And I put my phone number on my Instagram page, which, I get a lot of calls and a lot of texts and a lot of DMs, and I welcome it. The trick for me is really finding balance and having boundaries, which is a constant work in progress, because I'm not really great at it, honestly, the boundaries piece, but I'm getting there. A lot of things, even at almost 6 years, that's still relatively newly sober. It's old time 12-step fellowship that I'm part of is 5 years is you're a newcomer essentially till you got 5 years. And I know that some people don't like hearing that, but I've experienced it firsthand. I'm completely different. My 5th year was definitely my hardest year. And that, COVID played a huge role in that, but also some other stuff. And I definitely came closest I've come to drinking last year. And I think I've talked to you about that before, Chris. And it was early on and shit was hitting the fan, and I wasn't like maintaining my spiritual practice and my 12-step meeting attendance. And it's just like alcoholism, as most people that will listen to this know, it's a disease of perception, and the booze and the drugs are just like a side effect of our alcoholism. And I was so miserable one night. I was just like, anything would feel better than this. And I hadn't really fully bought into the concept of Zoom meetings at that point, and meetings in person were not happening, which that picked up pretty quickly again in Florida, because Florida just didn't give a fuck about the rules as far as when it came to COVID. And, it was like, I think I went like a month without a meeting, and it was really late one night, and there was a bottle of Tito's vodka in the freezer, and it was a really, really rough night. And I was just like, damn, dude, I think literally anything would feel better than the way I feel right now, including drinking that bottle of vodka and really fucking really blowing up my life, essentially, because it wouldn't have, it would have just really snowballed and just deteriorated from there. But thank God I did, man. But yeah, it was year 5, and I knew it coming into it. I was like, something, I can feel it. And the COVID wasn't a thing yet, and I really didn't know, but my intuition was like, this is going to be a really hard year. And it's definitely been the hardest year, but the last like several months have been like some of the best months of my recovery. So I'm really, really, really grateful for that. And I'm grateful to be like starting this, beginning my 7th year this month, and just like looking forward to a lot of like really amazing things, and just really, really grateful for it.
Right on.
Love that. I was talking to my friend Bobby we had on the podcast last week, and he said he was curious. He wanted me to ask this question. Basically, what for either one of you guys, both of you could answer, but like, what do you, I know one of Curtis's answers here, but what do you would consider is like you have in your sobriety toolbox? So like, I start with you, Kelly, like what would, if you have somebody coming in, what kind of things, ideas would you would give to people to put in their sobriety toolbox?
Well, some of it's going to be sitting, you got to practice this. So you got to sit and practice it, a phone list, talking to somebody. One of the things that I really believe in is mindfulness, which is meditation, to be able to sit and sort of separate myself from whatever the experience is, whatever the thought is, whatever the emotion is, whatever, so that I'm not all caught up in that, so that would be one. And then just, reach out to somebody, try to be of service to somebody else. That if I can get out of my own head, I'm going to be able to do that. Some of the things that we teach here are some of the DBT skills of, crisis survival skills would be, there's a concept called Wise Mind Accepts, and accepts is an acronym. So engage in an activity that's going to shift your thinking from whatever it is. One of the C's is contribution. So contribute to somebody else. The other one is comparison, sort of compare, like I just use Curtis's great example. I can compare that night when he's thinking of the Tito's to where he is today. So that comparison, it's like, right now sucks, but it ain't that bad. Or even further back. And the skill talks about compare to other people's lives. I have some issues. I'm a recovering Catholic. And so that's a little judgy for me. Sometimes I'll feel guilty if I think, my life's better than theirs. So I don't do that comparison, but I do compare to my life where I was and when it was really bad, and it's not that bad, and then the E is change the emotion. So figuring out some way to do something, if I'm feeling really sad and that's what the trigger is, put on somebody who's a comedian, or listen to a podcast that's going to shift that emotion, whatever that is. And it can be even if anger is the issue, that's the really tricky one for me. Sadness might be a better emotion, depending. And that's where people got to figure out over time which one's going to get you out of the mess, where you're not going to engage in that behavior. The P is push away thoughts. So again, I'm going to put it up on the shelf. Here it is on the shelf back here. I'll think about that later. T, change your thoughts. And that can be work a puzzle, count the leaves on the trees outside. And then S is sensation. So it's like I take a hot shower, I can take a cold shower, I can hold ice cubes, something that's going to really change some of the sensation. So those would be some of the things that I would really look at and talk about with people of a toolbox that are just sort of fairly, they're not easy. They're simple though, but because the challenging part is getting from here to here to make that phone call, because there's a lot of shit that can happen. That's the biggest chasm, right? It's like, back when I got sober, you had to pick the phones up. Curtis, you probably don't know what those were. They're phones. They had little rotary things.
Attached to the wall.
And they were attached to the wall longer, but they called it the 1,000-pound phone. Because picking it up. And so it's a lot like that. And so and you want to start early with people just saying, hey, these are some resources that we found helpful, and put them out there. And you want to be able to have reviewed them and have people start collecting their own when they're not triggered, when they're not in that space. When they're in that space, you do what Curtis talked about. You sit with them. I think you talked about it too, Chris, of just showing up, be there, walk alongside them. Maybe coach, guide them, but don't tell them what to do, or don't say, well, go use your tools. Well, fuck, they don't have it. Oops, I wasn't going to do the F one. They don't have them yet. And so it's like you can't have somebody practice something they haven't learned yet. And then being able to be understanding of that, because I've come a long ways from where I used to be. I'm a slow learner, be patient. So those would be some of the things that I'd say.
I love that. Curtis, you have anything to add to that? I know with Curtis, music is something that obviously you is something in your toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to the Rolling Stones pretty much for every occasion. But, I mean, tools being just pausing when agitated, making phone calls. Contrary action is a huge one for me. It's like, it's whatever my first thought is usually not the correct one, or it's what I think I need to do. Like, practice contrary action and do the opposite thing. But it's really, there's a lot of like evidence in some of the literature that I'm fond of that's like we intuitively know how to handle these situations that used to baffle us when we continue to do the work that's worked. I'm just trying to remain anonymous here at the
understand.
But if we do the work, we experience these changes in behavior and these intuitive changes in behavior where, I noticed like early on with the contrary action, with communicating with my ex-wife, that instead of escalating a conversation like I would at some point, if she's upset about something, it's like, it's way better to just ask how you can support somebody or how they want to be supported, or just owning your part in it, or just kind of like slowing the conversation down by trying to identify what's really happening. Or, it's like, would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy? A lot of the times it's just like, dude,
is this the hill you want to die on? I like that line too.
Yes. Yeah.
No, but no.
It's so huge.
Exactly.
And it's like, all right, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. Like, let's move on. Even if it deep down inside, I'm like, fuck this shit. There's no way I'm not right here. But that only comes with time and a lot of practice. But once like with everything, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And it just aids in communication, which is such a big part of every successful friendship, relationship, of every kind. And it's just, the communication piece of it was something that we talked about a lot when I was living at Gratitude Recovery, when Kelly has touched on the mindfulness piece of it. And there's a format called Dear Man, which is a way to basically look at a problem, identify it, explain it, resolve things in a more of a mindful manner when it could really be a situation that otherwise would be escalated. And it's just like, you never want to escalate things, and prior to, and even in like the first couple of years of my recovery, I look back on like some of the relationships I was in, and it was just like a lot of screaming and like, and I don't do that shit anymore. Like fortunately, I mean, maybe sometimes, like not very much though. And that's usually with my ex, if we're pushing each other's buttons or like, and that being said, and I've said this on here a million times, she and I are like best of friends. So I don't want to paint the picture that, I have some tumultuous relationship with her, because that couldn't be further from the case. We love each other. We joke around, we hang out, we go on vacations together, we send each other memes and just like dumb shit, But music, that's what I would have said first. For me, it's like putting my headphones on and like listening to songs that I love, or and Kelly was talking about how sadness could be a better emotion for you than anger or whatever. It's like I like to listen to like really sad songs that really cheer me up, which would seem to be very contrary to how that usually works. But I just like the emotion in them, and just usually like the story or whoever is singing them or playing them or whatever, So
yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I love that music piece. And then Chris, I would love to hear yours too, is because of exactly that. Some people can't tolerate the sadness. And for Curtis to know that's what's going to be effective to move me out of anger, where I might say something I regret, that's a gift. And then for me, music, I can listen to all music today. When I first got sober, there were a lot of songs I could not listen to because they just triggered me too much to what I'd done and they were caught up with so much memory. Whereas now whatever has happened, I can listen to any song and I don't have that anymore. Yeah, thanks.
Music is really powerful. Yeah. I mean, you can have such a happy, U2's my favorite band, and Beautiful Day always lifts me up. I even had a new friend send me the video this morning. He didn't even know that we never discussed U2, and there he's like, "Hey man, have a great day." And he's put the video there, and Stu's Had No Name is my favorite song of all time. I just feel it emotionally, it just makes my body move, and it makes me feel better and more alive. It's amazing, right? That's the same thing, when we say, we talk about memories, right? Like I just have memories with that song, just like you have memories with people you can always fall back on, and memories of places you've been. Like just because the times when you're looking back, look back at the good times. Again, we talk about choices, right? We could think of the bad, we could look back and be sad, or we can look back and be happy, because they're both there. They're both there, right?
Yeah.
The question is, where do you want to be? My thing is like, okay, if you want to be sad, there's nothing wrong with that, but just let it be a conscious choice. Let it be this is my decision. Like I'm gonna sit in that. That's a powerful thing to go, okay, I know this is what's going on in my body. I choose. I'm gonna sit here, and that's because then you're saying, that's a choice, not a reaction, right? I'm not just falling down the rabbit hole or just tumbling down the hill. It's I'm choosing to be here. But I know we've been having a great time here. We only have another 10, 15 minutes, but I would love to hear a little more from Kelly about you starting Gratitude Recovery, and like how, that idea of the name and your first, I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think I touched just a little bit on it. I lived in a sober living that was called an Oxford House where I went, and that was self-run, and everybody made their own decisions. It was pretty straightforward. We think you used, or you used, you're out. Just pack your shit and go. There was no questions. It was done. But love that. And then I met Annette on a blind date. The only blind date I've ever been on, which is great. And in that first meeting, we talked about doing foster care. And she had put herself in foster care to get away from a complicated dynamic at home, and really grew out of being in that place, And so that first night we met, it was like a 3-hour dinner. It was fabulous. And so we talked about a little bit of that. And then I talked about, I was still living in a sober living at that time, and talked about that community living. I grew up, I had 3 older brothers, 2 younger brothers, younger sister. My youngest brother died. But then every summer we had 4 boys that were the same age as the first 4 boys in our family that came and lived with us. And then during the school year, a family lived with us. And so I didn't think about that when she was talking about, well, this community living. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But it was like, we had 8 kids always in our house growing up. And there was just something about that. And so we had talked about, when I worked at the Canyon, we had talked about starting a sober living. When we got down here, Annette said, I need a break from the foster care. I mean, we had 6 kids in our house at a time for 10 years, and they were complicated. And there was a lot of grief and loss in that. You know, we had a number of kids who we had to ask to be removed. Some the state took. That was just painful. And then, so when she did some background acting. So she did that for a little while, and that's a crazy life, whatever. And then we started talking about, well, maybe we should open a sober living, because she likes the community living style, you know? And so that's a gift. I mean, for me, to have a partner like her who wants to be a part of helping other people, you know, and from a perspective. So she's got the Al-Anon perspective. And then she's also, she oversees our food. You know, we don't buy junk. People can buy it. Well, we don't. We buy healthy, organic, free range, wild caught, you know, food, you know, because one of the things about it is we think that food plays a huge part in healing the body, you know, and Annette was very powerful in driving that. And so when we started talking about it after I left Promises, where we talked about it, we talked about it at the Canyon, but the owners of the Canyon were not fans of us starting because of my role there and their fears of there being some conflicts that show up. So it's like, okay, we put it up back on the shelf. But then when we brought it out, we started talking about it. And she said, well, gratitude is really, it's what life is. I mean, if you're going to be grateful, and I look at what people in recovery have done, you know, and there's such a grateful experience around all of that she said, well, let's call it gratitude. And then at the time we had another partner, her name was Tina. And we went, that's perfect. Let's do, yes, gratitude, because that's one, we want to show up with that. We want to model that. And we want to have that sort of be the representation that sort of hits people when they first hear of us. And then we posted, you know, we had just started it, sent it out. And then one of the people I know from the profession immediately posted on Facebook, who are these idiots that think you can name a place Gratitude? And so I responded to him and said, hey, Andy, that's Annette's in my place. He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And so I just throw that out there because I think that people can take things however they take them, you know, and so Annette with the word, and then it tied into, it's like, okay, grateful. What are we grateful for? We have bodies. Okay, then let's heal the bodies. We have minds, you know, and so the mindfulness, again, we don't care which route of recovery. The 12-step programs are great, refuge recovery, smart recovery, but something that's going to help people get outside of themselves and experience gratitude of a bigger sense than what's in it for me. That we talked about to tie into that. And then, you know, healing the body. So we get gym memberships as well to say, okay, so healing the body is with food and exercise. And then there's lots of hiking and et cetera around, which is really good. And now in Malibu, we also have a yoga, a studio that we work with. That's good. And then from the mental side is, you know, sort of each person needs to have a team. You know, who's helping you with, you know, your psychological, do you have a therapist? Do you have an IOP? Do you need medications? And sort of tying back into one of the things that Curtis touched on for us, it was like, we're going to meet people where they are. Right. We're going to have rules because you need some structure, but we're going to have, and we went back and forth and I still don't know what we have. We either have structured flexibility or flexible structure. So we sort of look at it and say, okay, well, let's do something like this. But then for some, it can be tightened in, and for others, it can be expanded. And we want to, you know, give people the opportunity to have more individual dynamic independence based upon them and not some time limit or not some, you know, because the only thing that happens with time is it passes. And if I keep, you know, it's sort of like what we've talked about here for great, I can go in the other room pissed off for 15 minutes and only think about what pissed me off, come back and I'm going to be just as PO'd or more. Or I can go in there for that 15 minutes and I can meditate, let go, think of something I'm grateful for, or whatever the experience is, shift it into something different, come back and it's entirely different, and so all of those things sort of tied into, what that experience is going to look like. And then from I don't know if it's marketing or some of it's marketing, but more is, when I was at the Canyon and then when I was at Promises, we would see people leave and go to sober livings. And like I said, the ones who went to sober livings usually had better outcomes. And the ones who went to sober livings that did more than just provide a shelter and meetings did better. And so and some of it's my bias, I have emotion dysregulation. So DBT helps me, as much as AA for the contrary action. DBT calls it opposite to emotion action, taking a pause and being mindful to then move forward from a wise mind space, versus, take pauses as Curtis. I mean, so they're very similar and helpful. And then there's some great acronyms in those skills that we said, well, let's tie that into it. And we'll teach formal mindfulness. That I like, because I first learned of meditation in the 11th step from Dr. Stephen Kihara, who was a gentleman. Oh, I shouldn't have mentioned his name. Anyway, delete that. But this guy I met when I was living in sober living, and he said, Seidlitz, you need to meditate. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I had no clue. So he took me to meditate, and it was to sit in silence for like an hour, and I'm like losing my mind. And that was something we couldn't do. And so part of what we tied into with being at Gratitude's Mindfulness, we're going to start helping people train themselves. It's like one of the residents just yesterday said, I am exercising my meditation muscle. And it's like, yes. The more we can be present, it's just like the gratitude muscle. When I practice that, I'm more likely to default to it. Curtis talked about it. The more I practice these things, the easier it is to do them, that's my choice and what's my go-to. And, tying that into it to then say, okay, now these are things that we sort of piece together as a block. And then, what else helps? Okay. People who end up needing to be in a place like us, they've usually disconnected somehow, disconnected from themselves, disconnected from family, disconnected from friends, society. And so we believe in connection. So we like doing the morning group together, and we like having family style dinners or suppers. Where I'm from, dinner is the noon meal. And I remember the first time I came out here and said, and then I got used to it, went home to harvest. And I said to Mom, what time's dinner? She said, we just had dinner. You mean supper? I'm like, yeah, perfect. But having that connection for meals, even if you don't have any formal whatevers, there's a lot of energy, let's say, around family style meals, of what people grew up with that may not have been as good. And even if we don't lead them, we just sit there and just be present and talk. And, of those things of having a different experience, that we can then tie into this process of what that's like. I think that's sort of the things that led us around the gratitude and then starting it, and then I guess one of the things that I learned when I was at Promises, I was hired, I ran the residential program. I then moved over and took the IOP over as well. So I had them both. But before I went to the IOP, I'd seen a kid in residential and he was doing pretty good. And then I'd go down and we'd do a weekly meeting. I'd see him down at the IOP. He was living in a sober living that wasn't related to Promises. And so I asked his therapist, I'm not supervising him yet, but was going to later. But in that moment I said, hey, how's blank? He does not look like he's doing okay. And he said, well, I see him once a week in therapy and 2 groups a week and he's fine. I said, okay, great. Well, I'm just seeing what I'm seeing. Something's off. How are things at his sober living? And his response was, I have no idea. That's not my job. And one of the things that we also talk about and still do to this day is we're not going to be that. In this environment, and transparency may not always be good for somebody who doesn't want transparency, but we're going to give it. We're going to let depending upon the dynamics of the individual, we're either going to let their case manager, their therapist, their treatment team, their family know what's happening so that we're all on the same page. But for sure, we're telling the therapist. Some people have case managers and they say, tell us, we'll tell the family. It's like, that's fine. But we want to make sure, I don't want to, let's say Curtis, I don't want Curtis's therapist. Curtis is great. I could go in to family therapy right now. If Annette's not there, I'd walk out the best husband in the world because
Right.
and it's not like I would intentionally lie. I mean, I'm going to have a perspective. And so part of it for us is we want to make sure that everybody knows what's happening. How are they sleeping? How are they eating? Are they med compliant? Hitting the meetings, things that they may not remember from Tuesday that we keep track of. So everybody knows this is happening, not as judginess, but as practical. How do we help you build a better foundation to address these issues as you continue to move forward? So I think those are sort of the things that happened for us.
It's great, man. I loved all that. I kept thinking back to, because you're building this experience of like a family unit, and because you're making gratitude something that's being spoken, to me, like the highest form or the most effective form of gratitude is gratitude when you're, connecting it with somebody, or they're connecting with you, or they're sharing it, and you're having people, you're speaking gratitude into a house with people, putting people together, you're creating grateful memories.
For sure.
Is massive. That's what you want, right? You want grateful memories. You want memories, these memories people, because they're going to leave, and you're hoping that you're leaving them with these grateful memories they're going to take with them, are going to assist them in keeping their sobriety as they go on with their lives without you, So I think it's awesome, man. I love that.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing out there. I think it's awesome. I saw your places online, and I was like, man, that's beautiful. It's been so great talking with you. Curtis, I know we're over the hour now. Curtis, do you have any thoughts, any questions like to say, anything to say to Kelly?
No, I'm just really glad that you agreed to do this. And, I really love you and respect you, and I'm grateful for you. And you really helped to shape my early recovery, which is in essence shaped my later recovery. So I just have a lot of, a lifetime of gratitude for you, Kelly, and Annette as well, and the whole organization. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's one of those memories I will take again, that help, it really is important.
And thank you, Chris, for facilitating this per usual. You're awesome.
Oh, well, I'm just glad I could be in the room. Like I said, this is what I live for. So you guys just filled me back up, so I really appreciate it. With Kelly, you, if I was going to, in the show notes or whatever, we just put a link to your website. Is that the best way if people want to reach out to you? Or
yeah, you can put my phone number, is fine. My email address, gratituderecovery@gmail.com. And my phone number, I don't know if you, 818-312-2373. They can reach out. I will apologize to you both and to anyone who sees this or listens to it. COVID, I want to blame COVID. We were a little slow anyway, but COVID really got in the way. Our website and pictures are definitely not up to date on the website. While the house in Malibu, that big log house, was great, we had it for 6 years, and then our landlord rented it to a higher paying tenant, which is a treatment center. So we found another place, which I think is actually better. The view, I'm in the guest house right now, but this is,
show us, yeah.
this is our view. The other view wasn't bad. I don't know if the cameras, you guys can pick this up, but this is sort of what we have now.
It's really peaceful, man. Wow.
It is pretty peaceful. And we're in the Santa Ana, so the wind's blowing. And then this is what our house is like now over here. Watch that step. But so everything else, what we do is accurate on the website. And so people can definitely go and see sort of what we do, but just the houses are different. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Kelly. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, this has been really great, guys. I appreciate the gratitude meeting. It's been a good time, and I foresee one day the three of us walking the beaches in California together.
Amen. Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I look forward to that too. I agree. Chris, thank you for doing this. Curtis, thank you for the invite. It's been great hearing both of you and being a part of this process. This is really cool.
Cool.
Thanks so much, guys. If you guys could just hold on for 1 minute, I'm going to do the outro, and then we can officially say goodbye without the camera rolling, okay?
Okay,
so
cool.
I'm Chris with Kelly and Curtis, saying you guys got a lot to be grateful for, and just have a wonderful night. And we are going to the outro.